Gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, there's a new contender in the world of extremely busted builds in Elden Ring. And yes, I know it seems like there's dozens of new ones in the DLC, but that's just sort of how it works when you have already pre-existing silly strong build archetypes, and then you add in a whole lot of new tools that you can use around them. And that's exactly what's happened here. One of our prized build creations from the base game was the classic jumping double scavenger curved sword build, proccing bleed and multi-hit like absolutely crazy. But what if I told you that a specific new weapon type in the DLC actually creates a potentially better offshoot of this concept? A build more or less just as strong in identical situations, but has a further bit of potential niche that makes it really sort of kick off in a fun way. Today I present to you all Jump Milady. I say tipping my stack of 18 fedoras that I wear every time that I leave the house. This takes advantage of the new light greatsword weapon type and the way that its unique weapon moveset works, the way that it combos together different strings of attacks depending on how you use them, and just the power of the base light greatsword weapon itself, honestly. We take Milady, we stick it on blood affinity, and now it has reasonable blood loss buildup as a status, but still with reasonably solid dexterity scaling as well. We power stance a copy of the exact same weapon, and we do the jump attack. Like curved swords and twin blades, the power stance light greatsword jump attack is actually 4 hits, which means that it builds up multi-hit bonuses extremely quickly. But unlike the way that you would work with those other two builds, we don't go full in on jump attacks, we don't spam them back to back, because what makes these weapons unique light greatswords is that a jump attack skips you ahead in the normal power stance attack combo. If you start this combo grounded, the light attack combo for this weapon is 4 separate inputs, with the first and the third one being relatively long, before leading you into a double slashing combo finisher with 4 hits. If instead you do a jump attack, the next attack that you do is immediately the combo finisher. You skip and replace the first 3 long inputs that aren't the finisher and go right into the finisher itself. So the 2 input combo of this build is jump attack, which are boostable, and then a single power stance input for a combo finisher. It's a total of 8 hits from the weapon from those 2 inputs, enough to fully activate the multi-hit bonuses, and enough to proc a bleed on the vast majority of non-bleed resistant bosses too. So every one of our boosts will be active for that final hit, and this lets us take advantage of the rarely touched Twin Blade Talisman, which boosts the final input of a combo by 45%. Yes, 45%. That is massive, given the way especially that all of our buffs stack up over the course of a combo, and the way that this combo with these specific weapons is actually really quick to use. It just does incredibly high damage, and it really does a good amount for what this build is. The best comparison to jumping curved swords then is if you can only fit in jump attacks in the openings. If you can only have really tiny ones, curved swords will technically be better overall. But if you ever really have an opening for a combo finisher in this style where you can fit in these 2 inputs, then this version of the build with Milady is actually noticeably stronger. Curved swords gets a jump attack and then the 2 further inputs in the same exact timing window, which means no combo finisher, and so it just doesn't quite keep up with this new version and the changes that we've made. Which is fun to be able to say after all this time, because that was one of the best builds in the entire game. Not to mention that actually switching between these 2 builds is also quite easy because of the setup, and you could even just turn this into a full jump attack build if you just put in the claw talisman instead, if you really want to. So with all that said, let's just dive into how to make this full build the way that I have in this footage: the weapons, the armor, the talismans, the flask upgrades, spells, and your stats. Starting off, of course, with Milady. This is a new weapon in the expansion. We need light greatswords for this concept, and ideally we want ones that can have bleed buildup, which makes this sword the only option because you can change it to blood affinity. You can't get 2 of this in one playthrough though, but you can ask a friend for theirs if they're not going to use it, or just use this setup for a new game plus run as an alternative. As for how to actually get it in the first place, this is in Castle Ensis, specifically from the bridge that you enter the area to. If you hug the first building on your left, around to the side of it you will find a staircase. Then from that staircase you can see a ladder in front of you, and up that ladder you will find a chest. Inside of that chest is this sword. Then you want to put the sword on blood affinity so that we have scaling bleed buildup as a main sort of damage boosting engine of the build, and we do this with the seppuku Ash of War on both blades, which lets us coat each weapon in an extra layer of both damage boosting and a bit of extra bleed buildup as well. Then you will want a seal, and the Dragon Communion seal is just a natural pairing for this as it scales really well with arcane and faith. Moving on then, we have our armor, and for the helmet you want the white mask from the base game for a 10% boost to all damage done for 20 seconds after a bleed is proc nearby, including on yourself with the seppuku Ash of war before a fight. Then for your chest piece, you want the Gravebird Black Quill Armor. This boosts all jump attack damage that you do by 10%, which is the exact same value as the Raptor's Black Feathers armor from the base game, but it is new and it is aesthetically more interesting, at least in my opinion, so you can get this one from the Templetown Ruins Site of Grace in the lower Shadow Altus region, and once there, just ride Torrent northwest up and along this path until you see some Gravebirds defending a bit of a coffin. You can find the armor waiting there right at the top of the hill. Then for your other two pieces of armor, you have a choice. For full min-max damage, it would be Rakshasa armor for 4% boost to damage if you have both of these pieces equipped, but you can always use those slots for fashion if you would prefer, or just putting on some slightly heavier armor within our equip load limit. Moving on then from that are our Talismans, the Lord of Blood's Exaltation Talisman for a 20% boost to all damage that you do for 20 seconds after you trigger a bleed. The Rotten Winged Sword Insignia for a boost to the damage of successive hits, meaning the faster and more frequently you attack, the better this actually is, and we hit 4 times per input in this setup to activate this fully before the last strike comes down on the finisher. We use Millicent's Prosthesis as well for a smaller version of the same boost, and +5 to dexterity as a bonus too, and then in our final slot is our lovely Twin Blade Talisman for the big pump of bonus damage on the second input of our combo. Then we have our Wondrous Flask of Physic upgrades, and in here I absolutely recommend that you use the Thorny Cracked Tear for a further boost to successive hits on top of our talismans. Then you have Personal Choice for a boss-to-boss basis type of switching, but if you are feeling bold and trust in your ability to dodge a boss's patterns effectively, the Blood-Sucking Cracked Tear is a 20% boost to all damage that you do while it's active, at the cost of draining some of your health over time. If you would rather play it a little bit safer, not have that health drain, you can always use the Opaline Hard Tear instead, which is just a bunch of damage negation. You'll still do pretty damn good damage even without the Blood-Sucking Tear, but this helps a lot if you get hit more than a couple of times. Following that, we have our spells for the build 2, Golden Vow for a 15% boost to all damage that you do, and a 10% boost to damage negation for 80 seconds after casting. Flame Grant Me Strength for a 20% boost to both physical and fire damage for 30 seconds after casting, though it's always worth mentioning this is a build that causes bleed procs, and that means that the Sacred Bloody Flesh consumable is technically more value than Flame Grant Me Strength, and both occupy the same body buff slot, so you can only use one at a time. The main consideration is that Sacred Bloody Flesh are a consumable that needs to be farmed if you want them, but Flame Grant Me Strength is just a spell that you can use on demand. Then the final spell that we use is Blessing's Boon. This is just a quaint little regen spell that gives you 8 health per second for 90 seconds, and this is an otherwise unused buff slot, so this is just a nice little comfort bonus before a challenging fight. Then with all that covered, let's talk about your stats and attributes. How to level yourself up. 60 Vigor so you don't get slapped around quite as hard, 45 Arcane for the bleed scaling soft cap on melee weapons with Arcane, 25 Faith so that we can use our spells, then you need at least 16 Endurance for what we're wearing, but I heavily recommend the slight jump up to 18 just because the extra stamina is quite helpful. Then all of your remaining points can go directly into Dexterity, and there is still a fair bit of room for damage to be gained even from my setup from this if you are someone that is higher than level 150 as well, just by putting even more into Dexterity until 80 and then shoving more into Arcane for what that will do too. Then finally, let's just go over your buff order and how to actually, play the build. Before starting a challenging fight, use Blessing's Boon, which lasts 90 seconds, then use Golden Vow, which lasts 80 seconds, then you can drink your Wondrous Flask here, but if it has blood-sucking in it, I would wait until the end, and you want to use Seppuku on the left-hand weapon by two-handing it, then drink your FP Flask, use Flame Grant Me Strength with your right-handed seal without unequipping the left-hand weapon, then swap your right hand to Milady and Seppuku in that hand as well. This will leave you with both weapons powered up if you do it right, and it should be mentioned if you are using Sacred Bloody Flesh, you want to leave that consumable as the last thing that you do just before you enter the fight, as it has the shortest timer. From here, drink a health flask and then enter the boss room. Jump attacks in any opening provided are the best thing that you can do, and then immediate combo finisher follow-up if the opening is large enough for that. Sometimes it's honestly even worth trading hits with this if you are confident that the damage will go through before you get flinched, and while the damage is mostly just comparable to jumping scav swords, I will say the actual comfort and feeling of this setup is markedly improved in my opinion. It is far easier to actually hit enemies with these attacks than it is with spam jumping curved swords. Spam jumping attacks is just harder to aim properly. It requires a bit more precise timing and aim to really nail in comparison to this, which is just much better at tracking enemies. That said, for the most part, I just love that there's a new contender for the same build archetype that is shown up here, and is done so in just an incredibly unique way. I love that the moveset of like greatswords actually allows this to happen, and the way that it changes the setup and refocuses the damage towards the final hit is honestly incredibly interesting to me as someone who has played easily more than 200 different builds in this game since its original launch. So here it is, a new member of the Jumping Bleed Royal family, and it's honestly really quite a fun variation on the concept. I hope you've all enjoyed enjoyed this then, and hopefully you enjoy using it for yourself too if you try it. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.